event is actually about how to apply for the forgiveness of the PPP loan. We went through a lot of efforts. Every business owner that wanted to qualify for this loan over the last few months did put a lot of effort into applying for the loan, trying to find the lender that was the best for them. And the first round, some of us didn't make it. In the second round, it was a little better for some. So I'm hoping that everyone who is here today actually got a loan, but if you didn't, there's still time to apply. So although the event today is about the forgiveness and what documentation we need to put together to fill out the application, a lot of what we're going to discuss is also related to the eligibility for the loan. So if you have not applied, this is what would also qualify you to apply for the loan. So in today's session, we're going to talk about the loan forgiveness application, the PPP loan forgiveness application, which came out recently. What are the forgiveness eligibility criteria? How to calculate the amount that you can potentially get forgiven, and what documentation you need to put together as part of the application. And there's some documentation that you need to actually save, retain for your records in case there is more, there are inquiries in the future. And at the end, Florencia will talk to you about one-on-one sessions that you can have with SBS to help you with the PPP loan process, application or forgiveness of the loan. In terms of the overview of the loan application, the loan forgiveness application, the application came out recently on May 15th, and it looks like a very official document, 11 pages with a lot of information. It took me a lot of time to actually figure out the math behind it. And I'm a numbers person, but trust me, it's going to test your math skills. So get ready. I recommend that everyone who is going to complete this application kind of studies it for a little bit and figures out what goes here, what goes there, because there is a lot of back and forth numbers that you have to complete in one section that go in the next and so on. So really spend some time reading it and getting familiar with each page. And the information that I'm going to give you today will help you with that. We will talk about the steps to complete it, the calculation of the forgivable amount. Some lenders might have this application online on their portal. There is a version of it online that you can just search in the website of the SBA that you can, a PDF version, but it does not mean that that's the one that you will need to submit. The lenders might give you a portal with the application. But again, I suggest that you fill out a PDF version so that you have all the numbers ready for when you go online and complete it in the lender's portal. The application, as I said, has 11 pages. Some of those are informational pages. They tell you how to complete the application. They give you some instructions. One section, which is here at the end, this picture, the fourth picture here, is an optional section that talks about demographics of your business and the owners. But what really, in the end, we're going to be completing are the 3 pictures that we have here on the left. Interestingly, the way this works is that you have the first picture on the left is really the form, the calculation form that's going to determine how much you get forgiven. But we start backwards in this case we start calculating from the PPP Schedule A worksheet. So a lot of the information that we're going to need to summarize on the first picture on the left is going to start here with this worksheet page. I am going to refer to it as a worksheet or calculation sheet as we go on. So a lot of that happens in this schedule, in this worksheet. Then it goes into the Schedule A. So calculation happens in the third picture. Schedule A, which is the second picture here, gets filled in, and then information from here goes back to the first picture. And when you look at this on these 11 pages, you will see that when you start with the first picture here, the first form, that's the one that has a lot of information about your business. But once you reach the first line, it's going to say, bring the number from X section, which is referring back to Schedule A or the worksheet. Let's talk about the eligibility for forgiveness for a little bit. And before we get into calculations and how to determine the amount, in this section, we'll talk about what are the forgiveness eligibility criteria, which funds are eligible for forgiveness, because as we know, there were some requirements in terms of how the funds will be used or could be used in order to be eligible for forgiveness later on. And if not, if they don't qualify, if the usage doesn't qualify for forgiveness, you have to repay the loan with the interest of 1% over 2 years. The timing of the payroll, that the payroll and non-payroll expenses that you must take into account when utilizing the funds. So we can sit here and take the loan and use it for 2 years and then ask for forgiveness. So there is actually a very strict time period in which you have to use the funds. And then acceptable payroll and employee levels. There are some restrictions on decrease in payroll costs and some restrictions in the decrease of headcount from the baseline periods that we're using to compare to those 8 weeks that we have to use the funds. The forgiveness of the PP loan is going to be based on, as a lot of us have heard, on the number of full-time equivalent employees that we have been able to retain from the time that we had applied for the loan until today. There are very specific dates. So I'm saying the time that we applied, but it's really, as we go on, you'll see that there are time frames that you have to keep in mind in terms of the payroll costs that you incurred prior to the loan being given to you and the payroll costs that you're incurring now as you're using the funds. There are a few dates that overlap, a few dates that are different. So as you read the application again, really be mindful of those dates, because there are a few points in time that are going to be used to help you calculate the forgivable amount. The sum of documented payrolls for each employee, we're going to talk about that. And then other costs that qualify for forgiveness are the interest on commercial mortgages, rent payments, and this is commercial, no home, and utilities also for your business. Your forgiveness amount might be reduced again if your payroll was decreased by more than 25%, or if your headcount decreased. And there are a few exceptions, and we'll cover those as we go. Anything that's not forgiven will be repaid over 2 years with the 1% interest rate. And I believe still we have a deferral period of anything that we have to repay. There is no payment requirement for the first 6 months. And I should have said this, but there are a lot of changes that happen throughout the weeks to requirements, to eligibility, to timing. So we really recommend that you go to the SBA.gov website before completing the application, or even before using the funds, to see if there have been any changes made to any of the eligibility criteria.
And just to add on that, we had some comments about how there were some changes made last night to this. For example, it now allows for 24 weeks. There's 60% of payroll and 5 years to pay back. This presentation doesn't yet include those changes. We haven't had a chance to look into it and really include them yet. But we'll be updating this as we go. And if you need additional assistance, I will be going through how to go request a one-on-one credit consultation at the end, and they'll be able to help you with that.
Yes, thank you, Florencia. Yes, there are a lot of things that are under discussions right now. I read something about having a minimum, any loans under a certain amount being automatically forgiven. There is a lot of talks about making some changes to make this easier for the small business owners. We want to make sure that any information that you use, you have gathered it from the SBA website, some from official sources, and ensure that it's final before you go by, you make decisions based on that. So in terms of the eligible use of PPP funds, and in this case, we're going to talk about the ones that are eligible for forgiveness. We are aware of the fact that I hope, I'm shouldn't assume, but we might be aware that the purpose of this loan was to retain your staff. And so that's why the PPP Paycheck Protection Program loan had the objective of helping you retain or rehire your staff. And because of that, the requirement for forgiveness is that you utilize at least 75% of the loan on payroll costs. And these payroll expenses include salaries, commissions, cash tips, and in that group of salaries, commission, and cash tips, the maximum is $100,000 per year per employee, which means that the portion that's going to be eligible for forgiveness is 8 weeks of 100,000. So you do have to do math there. 100,000 divided by 52 times 8. So the max that each person's salary qualified for is 13,365. I hope I memorized that correctly. It's not that I just calculated. And then in addition to that, so there is that 100,000 max in payroll and commissions and cash. But then in addition to that, for each employee, you can include healthcare benefits, which are the premiums for insurance, contributions to a retirement plan, other benefits which are listed here like medical, family leave, all that can be in addition to that 100,000. For for self-employed business owners, Schedule C filers, which includes independent contractors or single member LLCs, you're eligible payroll, which is not really payroll, but it's your income as a business owner, is what you would report in Schedule C of your tax return. So everything that we're going to cover now in terms of calculating payroll, calculating decrease in headcount, you don't have to worry about that. If you are the only owner in the company and the only person working for the company, you don't have payroll. There is a simple number that you need for yourself, and you enter in one line. You don't have to worry about all the other calculations that we're going to discuss. But in terms of anyone who has payroll staff that is on W-2 payroll will have to go through the steps that I'm going to describe in a little bit. So 75%, at least 75% of the loan must be used in payroll expenses. And then the non-payroll expenses that are eligible for forgiveness are the ones on the right. And these are interest, all related to your business, interest on mortgage obligations, rent, and utilities. For those three groups, everything, all the contracts related to the mortgage and the lease and the utilities must have existed as of February 15th. That's what I know as of today. So they should have been they must have been in effect as of February 15th, which means that if you get a new office today and you just got it for the first time, those funds might not be eligible. Again, if anything changes between now and then, it's possible, but for now, keep these dates in mind. There were some talks about the fact that you could potentially use your funds, the PPP funds, to pay a debt that you had prior to February 15th. Other loans, so if you use the PPP funds to pay interest on those loans or refinance your idle loan, that was an option. However, if you do that, the benefit there is that you might be saving in interest costs, but those portions of the PPP wouldn't be forgiven. Keep that in mind. But again, if you do if in terms of reducing your interest rate is more beneficial, you can refinance your idle loan or use the funds to pay other debt. Great. Okay. So one thing that I was talking about dates before. One change that happened recently is that originally it was understood that these 8 weeks that you have to use your funds that are that you want to use towards forgiveness. So you have 8 weeks to utilize 75% of the loan on payroll and 25% of these other expenses that I mentioned before. And anything that's not used within those weeks, within that period for those expenses, you have to repay it at the interest. So these 8 weeks, originally they were going to start from the date that you received the funds through 8 weeks after. Now we know that you have a choice, and this might be helpful for employers that have our bi-weekly payroll, weekly payroll, monthly. It might be beneficial to one versus the other. But the second option is to have the 8 weeks start on the first day of your first payroll payment after you get the loan. So if I get the loan today, the 4th, and my first payroll after I receive this loan is next week, I could potentially start my 8 weeks count next week. So my 8 weeks will start when I issue that payroll. So you have that choice. Once you pick which route to go, you do some math. If I start from today, 8 weeks, if I start today, 8 weeks from today, my total expenses for payroll are going to be X. You compare that to starting the 8-week period in your next payroll, and see which one will give you more costs to apply towards forgiveness. For non-payroll expenses, it's the same idea. You would use 8 weeks from the day that you receive the funds, or the days that the alternative payroll cover period that you picked. In terms of the expenses, and this is towards the right, in terms of the expenses that you can include in the 8 weeks, it could be what you pay during the week, or expenses that you incurred, meaning that you are responsible for those expenses. You need to pay them, but you don't pay them within those weeks. You can still include that as long as you pay them in the next billing cycle. So for example, let's say I have, in these 8 weeks, I don't get to pay my utilities because, I don't know, I forgot. As long as I pay it for the next billing cycle, I can include that cost in those 8 weeks. Great. So let's see what we have here. All right. So one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that in order to, again, qualify for forgiveness, one of the requirements was that we keep our number of employees and our salary levels at the same, the number of employees are expected to be the same, with some exceptions as before the loan compared to now. And our salary costs cannot decrease by more than 25%. And that's the middle section here. This means that if you have an employee that was making $10,000 before some of the days that we'll mention in a little bit, February 15th is one of the days, then we have another comparison to that ends in April 26th, and then they give you another option to increase salaries again by June 30th. But if those salaries are lower than, if the new salaries, the salaries within these 8 weeks is lower by more than 25% compared to where the employee was before in one of those periods that we're going to discuss, then there is a portion of the loan that might not qualify for forgiveness. It's not that you lose the forgiveness 100%, it's just prorated. And there is a calculation that is done in the worksheet to show you to get to that number. That will be the amount that is not forgivable. And in terms of the number of staff, full-time employees, so these FTEs is full-time equivalent, and I'll discuss in a little bit how we calculate that. But the same idea applies here, that the expectation is that your full-time equivalent as employees will be the same during the 8 weeks as they were during the baseline period. There are some exceptions. Of course, we heard of a lot of employers saying that their employees, if they had let go of their staff because they didn't have a way to pay them, when they offered the employees to come back, some didn't want to. And so that's one of the exceptions, that the SBA is not going to penalize you for that. And there are a few others that we'll discuss in more detail. I'm going to stop for a second to see if we have any questions, Florencia, before I get too far.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions actually. Some of them are, I believe, have already been answered, but if I missed it, please feel free to repost it. One of the questions is asking if they can delay rehiring employees until there's actual work, being June 30th, the deadline in the last round of regulations. I believe so, right?
Yes, that is true. Yes.
Another person asked if it's okay to pay oneself as a solopreneur in one swoop of salary, or if it's supposed to be on a weekly basis or over a period of time.
And this is for a self-employed person?
I believe so.
Okay, so with the self-employed, if you're doing Schedule C, the expectation is that you're going to generate income in those 8 weeks, and this is something that I recommend you looking into further in case there have been any changes. But my understanding is that if you don't have employees and you are a freelancer, for example, and you got a loan for $13,365, it's not like if you make no money, you take the 365 and you pay yourself, you're done. I believe the expectation is that you're going to generate at least $13,000 in taxable income. Then you're eligible to use that as the basis for the forgiveness of your loan. So that you have to make money to be able to get the loan forgiveness for the solo owners. And sorry, and then to clarify the question, then those 8 weeks, yes, so if you make $10,000 within those 8 weeks, $10,000 would be eligible. Outside of that, it would be something that I would recommend looking into with your lender, if possible. If you applied as a self-employed, then you might be able to. There are some additional documentation that you might need, and some exceptions there that I recommend you look into. Anything else, Florence?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get through all of them. To be honest, there's a lot of questions. I'm going to try to put them all together and ask them all at once. But one person is a little bit confused about what if they calculated before that they had the equivalent of one full-time employee. Can they rehire now a couple of people equal to that one full-time employee? Or do they still have to offer and get turned down in writing from all the other employees?
Okay, that's a very good question. Everyone that was let go needs to be offered the job unless they were let go for cause or performance. If they were let go because we couldn't afford to pay them, they had to, and you want to use the PPP funds towards forgiveness, you would have to offer them the job, and if they turn it down, then you can replace them.
Okay, I think there's a lot more questions, but we can go through and I'll try to put them all together by the end.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so now let's talk about how you calculate the PPP loan forgiveness. If you are in a situation where you have more payroll than what you received in loans, then this is going to be easy for you. There is not a lot of proration to be done. But if you are in that situation where you let go some staff or decrease their payroll, you'll definitely have to calculate a lot more, because the goal here is to come up, and the application does a great job with this. Again, get a calculator and put some time aside to do this. It's not something that you can just fill out in 2 minutes and be done. You need to kind of calculate a lot of different steps, but the goal here is to come up with what is the amount that is not eligible for forgiveness because of reduction in payroll costs or because of reduction in headcount. So in this section, I'll show you the overview of the, let me move something, overview of the loan forgiveness amount calculation. We'll go over how to complete the PPP Schedule 8 worksheet, reduction in salary, hourly wage, or FTEs, which is full-time equivalent employees, and completing Schedule A and completing the loan calculator form. I will have to, I was doing this 2 days ago, and I really wanted to sit there and give everyone, like, if you divide 10 by 7.5, you get X. It is very time consuming. So in some of these cases, I might just just kind of give you a high level overview. And in some others, if it's really like something that I need to do, I might get a little deeper into it, but hopefully we have enough to get started. Great. This is kind of a summary again of some of the information that we have covered, but calculating eligible payroll costs and non-payroll. We went over what constitute payroll costs. I talked to you about the mortgage, the rent, and the utility. If in the middle section here, we have what will be determined in terms of reductions. So reductions due to changes in payroll, reductions due to changes in number of staff, and any other reductions that may have happened related to payroll expenses. And then at the right here, we have that you choose the forgiveness amount based on the lower of 3 calculations. Ideally, everyone would be eligible to get the full amount of the PPP loan forgiven, but there are 2 other options based on all the calculations that are going to happen in the worksheet, which are impacted. These calculations are impacted by the reduction in staff or reduction in payroll costs. So there are 2 calculations there that you might have your costs be payroll cost is the same from the baseline period to today because you had a bonus that you paid an employee, but your number of employees reduced, right? In that case, there is a calculation for that. You may have the same number of employees, but you had a cost reduction. So that cost reduction in payroll is going to affect the amount that you're going to be able to apply for forgiveness. So that's what these 3 options are. Here at the bottom, and at the end of the day, the amount that you're going to use as forgiveness, the forgiveness application is going to be the lowest of the 3, and the worksheet will walk you through that. The calculation of the forgivable amount on the worksheet starts with the PPP Schedule 8 worksheet, which I mentioned earlier, and that information from the worksheet goes into a summary of that PPP Schedule A. A lot of information from 1 goes into 2, and then information from 2 goes into the first page of the application section. So in order, here the order is the way you work the application, but this really number 3 is the summary of everything, and some information about the loan is entered directly on 3, is not included in any of the other worksheets. This here, or what I'm going to show you on the next page, is really a highlighted overview, an expanded view of the first picture on the left. So this here is the Schedule 8 worksheet. Again, if you don't have employees, you can skip this. This is not going to impact you, but if you have employees, then you complete this one here. And it's very straightforward. It appears to be. You enter the employees that you have during the 8 weeks. You're going to enter the salary that you're covering for those employees during the 8 week period, but this is based on staff that you had in 2019 that were making less than $100,000. So anyone who's making less than $100,000 would be listed here. The employee identifier will be the last 4 numbers of the Social Security, and the cash compensation, it says cash compensation, but it's really What that means, because it might be a little misleading, it's not that you pay them in cash, but it's that is not a benefit that you're paying through a third party. So this is salaries, commissions, tips. That's that section there. The average FTE, this is where we have to calculate the full-time equivalent. And there are two ways in which you can do this. You can, let's say you have a part-timer that works 10 hours a week. You can say 10 divided by 40, because a full week is expected, or in general is 40 hours. If someone works 10 hours, it's 10 divided by 40, that'll give you a percentage. You put that in here for that person. The other option, which I find simpler, is to just assign anyone who is a full-timer a 1, and anyone who is a part-timer a 0.5. So if that's simpler, you don't have to do a lot of math. And I would choose that. So anyone, if you have someone who works 5 hours, you put 0.5. If they work 30 hours, you put 0.5. Anyone who works 40, you put 1. And that will go in this section here. And then the last column, that's where we're going to calculate the salary reduction, which is going to be based on math. How much they're earning now over how much they're earning during the baseline period. All that is explained in this section at the bottom over here. If you follow each step, those steps are going to lead to that calculation that you're going to put in this column here in salary. So if you know, for example, that your staff did not, if they didn't get any reduction in salary, or they got only a 10% reduction, if you read these instructions, it will tell you that if the reduction is less than 25%, you enter a 0 in this column here at the end, because you only be I don't want to say penalized, but your forgiveness amount will only be reduced if you reduce payroll costs by more than 25% per employee. Anyone who has a salary reduction of more than 25%, you have to calculate that and put it here, and you follow the steps here. The box on the right here is for staff members in 2019 that made more than $100,000. So if you had any employee on payroll, they made over 100,000, you're going to list them here. But I'm trying to find my cursor, you're going to list them here. The cash compensation that you're going to enter here is the cash compensation, their salaries during the 8-week period. And remember, if you follow the instructions in the application, that you can only use $100,000 of their salaries in this calculation. I'll stop here for a second, Florencia, to see if there are any questions that we want to cover now, and that'll give me a chance to look at my time.
Yeah, for sure. So there's some questions about what kind of payments can be included. For example, are condo maintenance payment considered rent?
If it's no, so it sounds like that's a personal residence. If it's for office, it will have to be a condo. Let me think about that. So no, so it's first of all, it's for commercial business mortgages, and it's only interest and interest on the mortgage, utilities. I don't know, in some cases the condos include in their maintenance the utilities. For part of the maintenance is utilities, so you have to kind of either make a judgment call of like what portion is utilities, and this is all for business. It's not my personal condo, so that has to be very clear. So yes, there will have to be like there is some subjectivity there that I'm not 100% comfortable giving an opinion on, but there will be some calculation that needs to be done.
Yeah, similarly, a lot of people are interested on whether they can subtract their rent payments if they work from home for this.
Yes, again, it hasn't been that there has not been clarification given on that. I would assume that if you always worked from home and your home was your primary residence, you could, your primary office, you could, in theory, do a proration, but the application and the guidelines have not been have not specified that. I would do a little more research or talk to the lenders if you have an opportunity to do that.
Some people ask for clarification on contractants and part-time workers, if those can be included as a payroll for this.
Yes, so contractors cannot, but part-time employees on payroll, on W-2s can, and when you're calculating the average FTE over here, you would either enter a 0.5 for the part-timers or calculate their exact FTE full-time equivalent percentage, which is based on the number of hours per week worked over 40. So the example that I gave before, if you have a part-timer that works 10 hours a week, you can divide 10 over 40 and that would be 25%. That would be the number that you enter here. And you should do that to calculate the full-time equivalence before the loan and in this application. So you're comparing apples to apples. So use the same method for both. Good.
Oh, yeah, I think you're breaking up a little bit. So maybe if we could speak a little bit slower, it might be better. But,
okay, sounds good.
Or it might be just my internet. Other people are asking about the calculations for self-employed people, and we are going to go step by step through them in the rest of the presentation. But one concern is if the PPP can include payments into retirement plans and medical insurance.
Yes, so that's part of the payroll costs is you can include salaries, commissions, tips, and medical benefits, premiums for medical benefits, contributions to retirement plans, and these plans must be sponsored by the employer. So an employer's retirement plan and also other benefits to the employees.
Another kind of group of questions that I've gotten is whether people, if they're self-employed and they give themselves a raise, can they include it in this PPP loan forgiveness?
So if they, I'm assuming that is if they are on payroll. If they're on payroll, there is not a specific, there are no restrictions that will have been listed in terms of that. If you're on payroll before and you give yourself a reasonable raise at the beginning during this period, and it is something that you have done otherwise, that is your practice to give everyone a raise at the beginning of the year, then I don't see why that would be a problem. But it will have to be something that is reasonable. It is my opinion. It will have to be reasonable and something that you would not do during normal practice.
And the same thing for bonuses, if they can give themselves a bonus.
I would only, there is nothing that specifies that anywhere that I have read, but again, if bonuses were part of your annual bonuses policy, then you will continue with that. But I don't know if you could just all of a sudden give yourself a bonus because you got the PPP. I wouldn't. I can't comment on that specific situation.
And again, similar questions. If there's a limit on how you can, of how much money you can put on a retirement plan if you're self-employed.
So there are different plans, and that's outside of what we're covering here. There are different plans, so you have to look into the plan that is convenient, that's more appropriate for the business besides PPP. But I will also be mindful that remember that if you are making contributions to a plan now with PPP loans, the expectation is that this plan existed prior to us getting the PPP loan. So that I would be mindful of that. But if you had the plan before and you're just making normal contributions, then you follow the plan's requirements and limitations.
Yeah. Other kind of questions of expenses that people ask if they can be included is, for example, professional insurance.
No, only the ones that I listed so far, which is mortgage interest, rent, and utilities in terms of eligibility for forgiveness. If the funds are used for other expenses, then the loan will have to be repaid. That's the, yes.
And workman's compensation?
You know, workers' comp, it might be considered a benefit. I'm not 100% sure, but that is a good question. It hasn't been listed that specifically, but if it's considered, it's not a benefit to the employee. So actually, now that I think about it, so I would say no, it's more of insurance because it's not, yes, it's not a benefit to the employee. So I would skip that one.
Okay. Okay, I think we can go on. There's a lot of other questions, but I'll try to compile them into like general topics as well.
All good questions. All good questions. Great. So this section here is this is just an expanded view of the previous box here on number 1A, and I just explained to you, once you get this this presentation, you can use this to review. But this is just a summary of what we just covered. Here again, this is how to calculate the reduction, and the application gives you very detailed steps on how you get to that. But at a high level is you are taking the salary, the person's salary now during this period, the cover period, which is the 8 weeks, over their salary between January 1st and March 31st. And then when you divide that, you're going to get a percentage. If this is less than, if it's more than 75%, you stop there. That means that you did not decrease someone's salary by more than 25%. And this is, you do this per employee. So you stop there, you enter 0. If it is less than 75%, then they give you the opportunity to calculate in other steps whether you have increased, in case you have increased the salaries for your staff during this recent periods, or if you have done it, if you're doing this after June 30th, if you have increased the salary by June 30th. So the calculation will be the same, except that they are comparing different periods. Salaries as of February 15th, then you have another salary between February 15th and April 26th. If the answer is X, move to here, and if not, go to step 3, which is they're still giving you another opportunity to calculate the reduction. So again, follow each one of these steps. Is very like if you're doing this on a PDF that's editable, which you can find online, you can just fill in the numbers, write down, and enter the answers, and do that, or print the form and do it on paper, create a little sheet in Excel, and just play with these numbers and read them very carefully. Anytime you get something that doesn't sound right, redo it and get comfortable with the calculation. The last section here, E, is if you have, there are some steps here to annualize someone's salary. If they get paid by the hour, there will be instructions on how to annualize their hourly salary too. And then once you have completed the worksheet, these totals here, and I'll talk to you about the FTEs before I get there. So the FTE reduction exceptions. Right before this box, everyone here is someone who is with the company during these 8 weeks. If you have anyone who doesn't want to come back because they find another job, you let them go before, because of COVID, now you are ready to rehire them, but they decide not to take the job. You add their number here. You account for them in there. If you fire someone because of performance or conduct, that would go in here. If someone leaves voluntarily, so yes, if someone leaves voluntarily, that would add up into your Fte Reduction Exceptions. So what that means is that if you had 10 employees during the baseline period that we saw before, which are between it could be February 15, no, up to February 15. I think it was January 1 to March 31st. There is another time in 2019 that you can use, especially if you have seasonal employees. So if you had 10 employees during the baseline period, and now you only have 6, this 6 would be here in the first section. But then the other 4, if the other 4 didn't want to take a job, left voluntarily, or were fired for cause, you would add them here as a 4. So your total will still be 10. That's how you don't get penalized for those employees that left for some reason that you couldn't control or for cause. And then once you have all these boxes filled in, the application will tell you to use the data in box 1, box 2, box 3 to complete the PPP Schedule A. So this was all the work for that. And then once you have, from the table on the left, it was 1, 2, 3, and then this was the table with the staff that made over 100,000, boxes 4 or 5. You use this information to complete a feature step. This is again the same thing that we cover, how to calculate your FTE reduction to see if you qualify for the exception by rehiring them, or they didn't want to come back. And you have, these are again the summary of the 3 steps that we just went over. And here it tells you, box 1 goes in line 1 of the PPP Schedule A. So what we covered before was all the worksheet where you calculate the data that goes into PPP Schedule A. Once you complete all those lines found on these instructions, then we'll move on to completing the first page of the application. In here, you can see this is how it's going to look when you're completing the PPP Schedule A. It will tell you enter the cash, compensation, box 1, Schedule A worksheet, table 1. So it's very detailed. It tells you enter the average FTE from box 2 from Schedule A worksheet. And once you follow the steps, you have completed sections lines 1 through 5 and 13. But you come here to, so let me show you here. So 1 through 5, and then 13 will be completed from that worksheet. But then lines 6 through 9 of the application are these other expenses that are beyond payroll, salaries and commissions. This is where you enter contributions to healthcare insurance, contributions to retirement plans, and you also can use the taxes that you pay on payroll to states and local authorities, not to the federal government. So Social Security and Medicare taxes paid by the employer are not eligible for forgiveness, but some taxes that we pay to New York State, for example, New York City for unemployment expenses like unemployment insurance and some disability taxes that New York charges, those are eligible for forgiveness, and you enter that here. How is the sound, Florencia? As it's breaking, I forgot to ask.
For me, it's pretty good now.
Okay,
Some commented before in the chat that it was breaking, but okay,
good. Good. So on line 9, this is a good news for single member LLCs that don't have employees, for independent contractors. Everything that I talked about before in the other sections would not apply to you. You would only be concerned with line 9, compensation for to owners, and this information doesn't go in any of the tables that we discussed before. So if you have employees that make less than 100,000, it will go on the first table. If you have employees that make over 100,000, it goes on the second table, but your compensation goes here on line 9. and it's going to be part of the total, but it's listed separately. Again, the maximum for you and anyone is 13,365, which is 8 weeks worth of $100,000 in the year. And that's for cash compensation, salaries, and commissions. You can still have the insurance costs here and the benefit plans and state payroll taxes, and that you can enter for yourself too. Good. And once you have completed 1 through 5 and 13 and lines 6 through 12, there is over here, sorry, that before I go on there, there is a line 11, 12, and 13. These are focused on the reduction in headcount. Remember that on table 1, we talked about the reduction in payroll, and that was that reduction of 25% or more. If it's less than 25%, you're entering 0. But here we're going to talk about the reduction in the actual number of people, employees that you had before and after. And at the bottom here, you can see that for the baseline, you can choose the baseline period. You can choose either February 15, 2019 through June 30, 2019, or January 1st, 2020 to February 29, 2020. So that's going to be the number of employees that you're going to use to compare the to date to or against. So what does that mean? I would pick the lower of the two, right? So if you have 5 employees in 2019 during that period, and you had 10 between January and February, and you know you lost some people, then choose the one with the lowest number, right? There is a third bullet point at the bottom that says that if you're a seasonal employer, you can have a different period, which is any 12 weeks between May and September 15th of 2019. So read this carefully, do the math, which one is more convenient for me. And then in here, in lines 11 and 12, you're going to say, how many employees did I have in line 12 during the period that I chose? Let's say 8. And then what are my total employees that I have during the 8 weeks? Now in the total, line 12 is coming from those boxes, right? Because in those boxes, we had a column that says FTE equivalent, and the second box had the same thing. You're gonna add those two up. I'm gonna show you back here. So this column here, FTE and FTE over here, the sum of these two is what is the today. And that's where you're gonna enter in here, line 12. So line 11 is the past based on these days down here. Line 12 is the today. So again, careful calculating all those numbers so that you end up with line 13. We don't want this to be less than 1. So when you divide 12, which is the today, by 11, we want 12 to be higher or the same. So your number of employees didn't change. And remember that today is not going to be impacted by those employees that left voluntarily, that didn't want to come back, and that was taken care of in that box that was called FTE exceptions. So if this is not one, I would actually suggest that you start today to project what this is going to be in case you need to make any changes to your payroll. Because if someone left voluntarily and you rehire them, and you replace them, that is a good thing. You can replace people that didn't want to take the job. You can replace people that you fire for cause. So if you need to start working on that, now is the time. And now that we have completed all those steps, exhausting, right? I hope it feels the same. I know I don't want to scare you, but it's a lot of work if you have employees with reductions in salary and reductions in headcount. If you're lucky and you didn't let anyone go and you didn't have to do any salary reduction, then this would be a piece of cake. Otherwise, there is a little bit of work. So once we have completed all the worksheet, the Schedule A worksheet and the Schedule A, you come back here, which is, to me, this is like the cover sheet of the application. This is where you enter your company information, your loan information, and then a lot of the information that we calculated in Schedule A will come in here. So you can see here, line 1, it says payroll costs, enter amount from PPP Schedule A, line 10. So it's telling you, go back, pick something up, bring it here. In addition to that, so that's kind of like one of the lines, one of the few lines that come back from here as a summary level from Schedule A. Besides that, line 2 and 3 and 4, 2, 3, and 4 are the non-payroll expenses. So your interest payments, your rent, and your utilities, interest on mortgage. So those you're gonna enter here. And then this section over here that says adjustments for full-time equivalent, this is where you're going to enter some of the information that we calculated before that are going to determine whether you have reductions of headcount or reductions of payroll for more than 75%. And all this is going to come in here as percentages in some cases that are then going to be used to calculate what your potential forgiveness amount is. So remember at the beginning, I was explaining that either you utilize the full loan for 75 for payroll and 25 for these other items that qualify within 8 weeks. That's the best scenario where you accomplish that in 8 weeks. Then that's the loan amount that you're gonna get forgiven. If there were reductions in payroll or headcount, you would enter the proper amounts here. And then the lowest of those three, the modified total forgiveness amount, which is a multiplication of line 6 by line 7. And if you read that, it will make sense. It's just taking a percentage of the percentage reduction times the potential forgivable amount. If you do that, that will go on line 8. The total PPP loan amount will go on line 9. And then if you have reduction in payroll costs, there will be that percentage of, let's say your payroll costs would be, this number here becomes, let's say, you reduce by 30%, for example. You reduce your payroll by 30%, the max is 25. That 5% differential, that's what's going to impact line 10 here when you calculate the forgivable amount. In the end, line 9 here is the smallest of 8, 9, or 10. 11 is going to be the smallest of 8, 9, or 10, which means that's the amount that is eligible for forgiveness. Let's see the time. Wow, it's 12:07. Great. So this is most of what I wanted to cover. The rest I can go through very quickly. It's all about the documentation, which is what you expect. A lot of forms, payroll reports, proof of that you had the right staff level, that you gave, you asked people to come back and they didn't come back, proof of non-payroll expenses. So anything that just is all reasonable, is pay stubs, is 940s from forms that you file with the IRS, it's receipts for utilities, it's the lease agreement and the rent agreement and the electricity contract, because you're going to need to prove that for those three, you had these contracts before February 15. If you don't, which is the section over here, if you see here, some of the dates will say February 20th, you're going to need support for the 8 weeks of expense, plus some document that shows that you have that account as of February 20th. That's for the non-payroll. For the payroll stuff, you're going to need the normal 940s from 941s that we file with the IRS. Keep in mind that the 941s are quarterly. So what they're looking to see is that the 8-week period is covered in one of those forms, in one of those quarters. That's one thing. But the 940 alone might not be enough, because the 940 is going to have 3 months of data. And we need to show the calculation for 8 weeks. So you're going to need your payroll reports also for those 8 weeks. That's just more additional information related to the calculation of the FTE. It's all going to be based on payroll reports, the before, the after running report from 2019 or the first 2 months of the year. Follow those instructions. Create a repository with all this information so it's very easily accessible. I say to everyone, start doing it now. Every time you run payroll, drop in there the support for that for the next 8 weeks so that you don't have to scramble the day that you want to submit your application. We want to get this forgiven as soon as possible once we use it. Some documents that you don't have to submit with the application, but that you should keep are just some of the calculations that you put together to show the reduction in salary calculations, the worksheets. Some of these, they don't have to be provided, but you should keep them in a folder. Again, create this PPP loan folder and don't delete it for the next 6 years so you can support all of that. You will get a copy of this presentation. You'll get a recording so you can refer back to this and read this with more time. And now, Florencia, it's up to you if you want to take some questions or just talk about the one-on-one consultations. I leave it up to you because that was a lot of material to cover.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ramon, and we really appreciate you volunteering and doing this with us. I think we can go to the next slide so that people can see how to apply for a one-on-one appointment. I think some of the questions that we received are a little bit specific for people. Some are a little bit outside of the context of this workshop. So if you, for example, need help in how to refinance your EIDL, I would suggest going to a consultation. And if you have questions about your particular kind of business, again, go for a one-on-one consultations because there's just not enough time for us to, unfortunately, cover all of these questions. But in general, I think there were some pending questions that we have that would be really helpful to cover really quickly if we can. I know we're over time, but for example, a lot of people were concerned whether they have to be generating income in the next 2 months in order to apply for PPP forgiveness.
Sorry, Florencia, I was looking at the chat. What was the question?
If they have to be generating income to apply for forgiveness.
Oh, as an independent contractor and single member LLC owner, as of now, my understanding is that you do have to be generating income equal to the amount that you are going to apply for forgiveness for. But and if things change all the time, so I would, if you reach out to me privately on LinkedIn or Instagram, I'll confirm that for you and give you a more precise answer. But right now, what I know is that you are supposed to be generating income. Yes.
Another question is if the loan is going to be taxable and considered income for 2020.
Oh, that's a great question. So the forgiven amount is not going to be taxable, but the expenses that you use to apply for forgiveness are not deductible. So it's a wash. You get 10,000 forgiven. You pay 10,000 in salary. The 10,000, the 10,000 net to zero. No impact in your taxes, in either way.
And just to reiterate, some people are asking if you can open a new business to apply. I think the answer is no. This is for existing businesses that were already in place and already had income. What else? Again, some people are concerned about whether 1099s are eligible for this.
So the 1099 recipient is eligible to apply for the loan as a business owner, but the costs paid to 1099 contractors by the employer are not eligible.
Okay. And can self-employment taxes be included?
Self-employment taxes, if it is, no. So the federal ones, and no, the federal self-employment taxes cannot be included now.
Okay. Again, some people, yes, we're going to be sending out the slides. You will get everything so that you can go step by step. Another question that we had is whether non-payroll cost can be incurred in the 8 weeks, as it happens with So non-payroll costs can be incurred in the 8-week period. Do payroll costs need to be incurred in that 8-week period as well?
Yeah, so you need to select the covered period, has to be the same for both, the same 8 weeks for both types of expenses. And yes, you can, but then once you select the period, then you can choose to use incurred costs instead of pay, or pay costs.
Sarah wants to know when the application is due.
Oh, that's, so the application, I don't have a deadline for submitting the application. That is a very good question. I know that once you use it, the funds, I will submit it right away. And then I believe banks have 60 days lenders have 60 days to respond to your application.
Then finally, do people need to request a letter from employees who paid? Like, do they need any kind of written confirmation?
So if you're paying the employees, the assumption is that you have them on payroll, right? So you have the records. You have the record of payroll. If you're paying someone out of the books as contractors, that doesn't qualify. So payroll, you control the payroll documents and the register. What you need from employees is only those employees that don't want to come back. You need written documentation that they are rejecting your offer of employment. But all proof of payment is on you.
Krista says that if the bank or lender they apply through would help them with the application. I think that depends with who you applied for. We're offering this. We don't offer the loans, but we're offering help to people through the 101s, through these workshops to get forgiven. So really that depends. I don't know what to say to that. I don't think I have an answer. What else? Again, Larissa asked if this can be applied to start a new business. No, it has to be for businesses that have already been existent. Jacqueline asked if property owners that rely on tenants to pay mortgage, if they can apply.
Repeat the question, I missed.
If property owners that rely on tenants for income to pay the mortgage, can they apply?
Oh, so the property owners, if that's a business for them, they would qualify just like any other business, and the same rules would apply in terms of what qualifies for forgiveness. Payroll cost has to be 75%, and if they're the only person working, then they'll qualify. But it's the same criteria. If this is someone that hasn't applied, then yes, you qualify. If you already applied and you're now dealing with forgiveness, then the same criteria that you used to apply, in theory, you can use to ask for forgiveness.
Okay. Safisha wants to know if payroll taxes can be included as a forgivable cost.
Payroll taxes, only the payroll taxes paid to the state, not, and let me make distinction, because there is a confusion around this sometimes. So if you pay someone $10,000 and you withhold $2,000 for payroll taxes, that is the $10,000 that counts. So the employee's payroll taxes are included in their salary. The employer's payroll taxes, only those paid to the state qualify, not to the federal government.
Then we also got a question on if PPP forgiveness can be integrated with pandemic unemployment.
I don't know. I'm not very familiar with all the unemployment laws and requirements, but I don't believe there is an overlap in terms of the owner applying for unemployment. I don't see how that would work, right? So if I'm the owner and I apply for unemployment, then I cannot be paying myself a salary in theory. So I wouldn't have a salary to apply for forgiveness. So the question is a little more complex than something we can answer right now.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think the goal of this product of PPP forgiveness is for people not to apply for unemployment. So right. I would imagine that it would not be, but again, maybe the best idea is to schedule a one-on-one consultation with a financial advisor to take a look at your or your personal situation.
Yeah.
I think, okay, there's some more questions here.
Mm-hmm.
COVID sick pay. Karine wants to know if she paid COVID sick pay from the federal mandate. Does she remove that pay from the employee total?
No, so that's an additional benefit. So you do, if you pay for paid sick leave or during COVID, that's an additional, that qualifies, and it's in addition to the salaries.
Yeah. There's also some confusion on whether people can apply for both the PPP and EIDL. I believe yes, right?
You can apply for both, yes.
And finally, do we use gross or net payroll for employee totals?
Gross payroll.
Okay, I think I don't see any more questions. There were some questions that were repeated, like if people can give employees a raise, and I think you covered that, so we'll leave that for people to look over the recording. And also if PPP funds can be used for mortgages, that was also covered. So I think somehow we were able to get through all of them. And again, I apologize if anyone had a question that I wasn't able to put forth right now. But I would definitely recommend people to sign up for 101s. Again, these are being offered through WeNYC, but there's also other assistance from the Department of Small Business Services, and I would also encourage people to take a look at that website because there's a lot more. I want to thank you, Ramona, for doing this presentation. Again, we went over a lot in time, but I appreciate everyone who was able to stay. For those who were not able to stay or join late, we are going to be sending both the presentation and then also the recording. And again, if you still have pending questions, please schedule an appointment and you'll be able to talk to someone who can take a look at your personal situation. Yes. So thanks everyone. Thanks Ramona for everything. Really appreciate it. One of our WeNYC superstars.
You're very welcome. I love doing this and I love working with you. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you everyone. The questions were great. And thank you for staying with us this whole time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Please take care, stay safe. And yeah, we hope to see you soon in other events and mentor sessions and workshops. Right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.